The morning they stuffed my father's faded flag into a plastic bag like trash, something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I stood there with my coffee while Karen, the HOA president with the clipboard and the taut Smill, lectured me about unapproved poles and safety risk. She called it a courtesy removal. I called it disrespect. That flag hung over Dad's workbench for 30 years. It wasn't about fabric. It was about the man who taught me to fix a mower belt with patience and to measure a day by peace, not noise. Son, he'd say, a man's peace is worth more than any house. That night I pulled out the map I'd been staring at for months. A small farmhouse just beyond the HOA line. 10 acres. Gravel drive. A cottonwood holding up the sky. No covenants. No patrols. Just county code and common sense. 2 weeks later, I closed cash. The morning I loaded the truck, Karen waved across the cul-de-sac like she knew a secret. I waved back and kept packing. Moving days smelled like diesel and fresh-cut lumber. Ron brought his flatbed. My sister Beth ran staging like a pro. We loaded the life that sneaks up on U-chipped coffee mugs, Mom's old rocker, the flag bracket I refused to throw out. At noon, Karen marched over with her assistant Vicky. And a stack of papers. You didn't submit an exterior change request for that planter box, she said. I won't be needing approvals where I'm going, I answered. Her smile cracked. You signed covenants. Continuity matters. Values depend on, then you keep the continuity, I said, cinching my grill straps. I'll keep the quiet, he rolled out, and relief rode shotgun. The farmhouse sat back behind a split-rail fence. Porch boards spoke under my boots. The air smelled like warm hay and wet dirt. I set Dad's flag on the kitchen table like a guest of honor. Before sunset, I walked the property line with a tape, a notebook, and respect. The surveyor's orange ribbons flicked in the breeze. No HOA signs. No wandering patrol. Just wind chimes down the road and cicadas singing harmony along the ditch. At dusk, a glossy white SUV crawled by. HOA sticker flashing like a badge. Karen, she didn't turn, and just measured my grass with her eyes and drifted on. I laughed to myself. You're out of your depth, I said to the cottonwood, and set the flag above the mantel until I could sink the new pole. Next morning, gravel crunched at the gate. 2 sheriff cruisers idled with windows down. Karen's SUV parked behind them. She talked with her hands so big her bracelets threw sparks in the sun. Heat climbed my neck, not fear, resolve. I stepped to the fence with my coffee. Mornin', you Caldwell? The tall deputy asked. That's me. I'm Harris. We got a call about a disturbance. Ms. Karen says you removed fixtures without approval and trespassed on common property. That's common property. I said. Karen thrust glossy photos through the bars. Median plantings? Mailbox cluster. I moved, I said, even and steady. Outside your HOA, this is county land. My line runs from that marker to the back fence. Your covenants stop at the road. That's not how community standards work, she snapped. He's bound by continuity, ma'am, Harris said gently. Not out here, he's not. Ask for the deed. I brought the folder with the county seal. While the deputies flipped pages, Karen's foot tapped gravel like a metronome. Without the subdivision behind her, she looked small. Out here, the wind carries a different authority. Harris nodded. Looks clear. Ma'am, he's outside your boundary. If you keep entering his property, that could be trespass. Karen pointed at me like a teacher correcting a child. This isn't over. We have ways of dealing with this kind of attitude, Karen, I said, quiet enough to make her lean in. You took my father's flag down like a weed. The only thing I'm growing here is peace. You're not welcome on my land. The cruisers rolled away. She left behind a cloud of dust and a handful of phone photos of my fence and my truck. As the road settled, a tight band around my chest loosened, the kind of rightness you can taste. After lunch, I set the post hole digger by the cottonwood. Honest work steadies a man. Each clink was a promise. I was done letting strangers define the shape of my days. At dusk, I raised Dad's flag. The sky turned a forgiving blue. The fabric snapped and then rested, like an exhale. I sat on the steps with hot coffee and let the quiet settle quiet I intended to defend. 2 days later, a siren floated over the pasture like a rumor. 3 units this time. Red and blue strobed against the cottonwood, turning the flag into a heartbeat. I put my mug down and walked. No camera, no calls. If a man needs witnesses, he doubts his ground. I knew mine. Deputy Harris stepped out, hat squared. A younger deputy flanked him. Karen arrived in a spray of gravel. Clutching a document tube like a baton, "We got a complaint of illegal construction," Harris said. I glanced at my construction, a flagpole and curing concrete, and a neat stack of cedar for the porch rail. The corner brace, hole by the fence, was roped off like a courtesy. Illegal where? I asked. Karen unfurled papers with theater. Per Design Guideline 7.2, exterior structural additions require pre-approval. This pole. That fencing, non-compliant. Harris cleared his throat. "Miss Karen, we discussed boundaries. Then to me, mind if county code takes a look? He's en route." "I'll brew another pot," I said. While we waited, Karen prowled. Heel, toe, heel. Toe snapping pictures, towing onto my gravel like a dare. I kept sipping. My father used to say a man's fuse is his responsibility. Keep it short and you'll live in sparks. The code officer rolled up Jenkins, stocky, sun-creased eyes. Firm handshake. "You Caldwell?" "Yes, sir. Complaint says unpermitted structures. Let's walk." I showed him the plat with the HOA boundary hatched on the far side of the county road. The deed, the permits for the pole, and the rail filed the day I moved. Backbone and paperwork. "Dad's way?" Jenkins hummed approval. "You're squared away," he said, boot-tapping the footing. "Depth is above code." "This is outrageous," Karen snapped. "Standards are standards." "County standards," Jenkins said, not unkind. "We don't enforce HOA covenants." "He's taunting the community with that flag," she hissed. "It's aggressive." The yard stilled. Even the cicadas paused. "That flag is my father's," I said evenly. "He wasn't a soldier. He fixed lawnmowers for folks who couldn't pay and painted flags on kids' bikes on the 4th. Aggression is tearing it down because it didn't match a newsletter." Harris shifted like a man resettling a holster. "We done?" "Done," Jenkins said, signing the tailgate. He handed me a copy. "In compliance?" Karen's eyes shone with fury. "In fear, if you won't protect standards, we will. We'll file a nuisance. We'll call the county board." "Will, ma'am," Harris said, calm but final. "Unfounded calls, misuse services. Step onto his land again without cause, and it's trespass. Harassment is its own charge." Vicky tugged Karen's sleeve. "Maybe we should go," she whispered. They left. The sirens died. The cottonwood breathed again. Jenkins tapped the pole once more. "Good mix," he said, and drove off. I stood with my hands on my hips, watching that flag. Sometimes, after you tell the truth, the wind agrees. It should have ended there. People wired for control don't quit. They change tactics. By Friday, an anonymous note waited under a rock on my porch. "We don't want your kind here. No rules. No respect. Keep IT down or we'll make you." Tight handwriting. Angry R's like fence posts. Meanness where kindness would have been cheaper. I bagged it and filed it in the junk drawer with rubber bands and batteries. Then I built the porch rail. Every board set true. Top sanded so smooth a coffee mug could glide. I poured a fresh pot and set 2 empty cups on the step. For any neighbor willing to talk, I told the cottonwood, and smiled at my own foolishness. Saturday, A truck I knew rattled up Huro from down the road. Hands like catcher's mitts. Laugh that starts in his boots. You staring up the HOA Hornets? He asked. Just moved outside him, I said. He scratched his beard. Karen called the feed store. Told M not to open you an account. Said you were uncooperative with community standards. Told her our standard is we don't let one clipboard do our thinking. Sat and sipped. He told me who on the county board actually listens. How Karen took over after her grandfather moved away because his grandkid's playset was too colorful. Folks were tired. You mind if I bring the guys Tuesday? Earl asked. We'll help you set fence along the ditch. Keeps the looky-loose out. You bring posts? I said. I'll bring brisket. By Tuesday, the chalk line ran straight as a sermon. Earl showed with all soft Labrador, ease on Troy's, and burned neckhand, a teenage kid hiding under a hat brim. We worked until the shadows leaned long. Posts sunk deep, rails tight. A simple fence that said, here's where I start, you stop. We were tamping the last post when the white SUV paused, then lunged onto the gravel. Karen stepped out before the engine quieted. Get him out, she barked into her phone. He's blocking community passage. Community passage meant curiosity and control. Earl tipped his hat. Ma'am, this is a private ditch. We're not community. We're neighbors. She pointed at me, voice bright and brittle. This isn't over. Only now it sounded less like a promise, more like a fear that the room had stopped listening. Karen, said steady, doesn't have to be a fight. You live your way. I'll live mine. There's only one proper way, she said. That's the thing, I answered. This is a big county. Some of us like porches that don't match. She left. No sirens followed. The sun laid honey gold on the fence. We leaned on our shovels, breathing like men who'd earned their air. That night I slept through till morning. No patrol footsteps. No emails about mulch color. Just crickets. Quiet. And my father's flag waking in the soft wind. A week later, I set out folding chairs not for a fight. For a conversation, the county board holds open comments every second Thursday. I printed my deed, the boundary map, and Jenkins's inspection sign-off. I didn't plan to speak unless I had to. Sometimes just showing up changes the air. Before I left, I set a small sign at the gate. Coffee's on. If you're a neighbor, stop by. Not a dare. A promise. Small towns settle things with calm, presence, and hospitality. Porch first. Paperwork second. Earl climbed in to ride along. You sure you want a crowd? He asked. I want the right kind, I said. The quiet kind? The county building smelled like floor wax and paper. The flag at the front stood still in the AC, rows filled with farm caps, church dresses, 2 blue feed store polos, and the librarian with a butterfly pin. Then Karen arrived with Vicky and 3 HOA board members, arms loaded with binders like ammo. She scanned the room. Saw me. Saw Earl, her mouth thinned, Ms. Hargrove, the chair teacher's posture. Kind eyes opened the floor. Karen popped up. We have a situation, she began. A homeowner moved adjacent to our boundary and is degrading our standards with unapproved structures, antagonistic signage, and fencing that obstructs shared aesthetic flow. He refuses architectural review and encourages others to undermine rules. We ask the county to compel removal of non-compliant items that lower our values. Heads tilted. Antagonistic signage. I thought of my coffee sign and smiled. Ms. Hargrove nodded. Anyone else wish to speak? I stood, not dramatic, just steady. Ma'am, I'm John Caldwell. I moved to a farmhouse outside the HOA line. I followed county code, pulled permits, passed inspection. I raised my late father's flag on a pole set to depth. I built a rail that won't splinter a child's hand. I've had law enforcement visits not for violations but for disagreements. I'm not asking you to punish anyone. I'm asking for quiet. Quiet. The word lifted heads. Folks can hear their own mornings in it. I set the map on the stand. Boundary bright. This is the HOA, I said, tapping. This is me, tapping the blank space. Once you cross this line, they're neighbors, not rulers. Miss Hargrove leaned forward. We have codes report. You're in compliance, Mr. Caldwell. She turned to Karen. We don't enforce covenants. We can't compel residents outside your boundary to adopt your standards. Ouch. Karen bristled. So there's no recourse for someone degrading neighborhood character? Al rose from the third row. Ma'am, a man's flag and fence ain't a threat. Harassing a neighbor is, the librarian added, soft but clear. We've seen more patrol cars on that road in a week than in a month. That's not community. That's noise. One rap of the gavel. We won't referee what conversation can fix, Ms. Hargrove said. Ms. Karen, your authority ends at your boundary. Misuse of emergency calls will be referred to the sheriff. Mr. Caldwell, document any further harassment. Color climbed Karen's cheeks. For a heartbeat, she'd look less like an antagonist and more like someone who built her identity out of rules because the world once scared her. I didn't hate her. I didn't want to win like that. I just wanted coffee without sirens. We stepped into heat bright enough to make a man squint at his. Earl clapped my shoulder. Quiet justice, he said. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I was wrong about you. Could I stop by for coffee? -v.vicky.send a time, Earl said, grinning. Hide the good cups. She came that afternoon. Waited at the gate until I waved her in. Hands shook a little around the mug. I thought rules made us safe, she said, eyes on the rail. Karen isn't a bad person. She lost her husband 2 years ago. Rules made her days make sense. Grief can look like control, I said. But control makes bad neighbors. I'm stepping down from the board, she whispered. I want to live where a flag feels like a welcome sign, not a warning. We sat in comfortable silence while the wind talked through the cottonwood. She left with a sack of my sister's cookies and a promise to bring good news if she had any. A week later, a letter arrived, handwritten, looping script. HOA board special vote. Karen had been asked kindly, firmly to step back. New leadership pledged to reduce patrols, refocus on actual maintenance, and rebuild goodwill. Goodwill, maintenance, plain words for good work. That evening, the road stayed quiet. No slow-rolling SUVs. No hard stares through glass. Just 2 kids on bikes who stopped to pet Earl's dog when he wandered over, tail writing his name in the air. I smoked brisket under a forgiving sky. Earl, Al, and Troy came by. So did the librarian with the butterfly pin, carrying macaroni salad that tasted like grandmother's. We ate at the picnic table I'd sanded smooth. We traded small stories, the kind that rebuild neighbors like old barns. One board at a time. After the plates were stacked and the coals went dim, stood by the cottonwood and looked up at Dad's flag. It moved soft. Not as a declaration. As a heartbeat steady, present, not for show. I remembered that first morning when Karen bagged it like waste, and I felt no triumph. Only relief, like releasing a breath I'd been holding since boyhood. Here's what I learned. Why, I'll tell any man drinking Porch coffee and wondering whether to draw his own line in the dirt. Sometimes standing up for what's right means standing alone. Until others remember how, you don't need a speech or a scene. You need a fence, that's true. A flag raised honest. Paperwork in order. And the courage to invite folks to sit and talk. Have you ever faced an HOA like this? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you believe some fights are worth having, hit subscribe. Let's stand up together quietly, like neighbors who finally remembered what that word means.